pasta woman with long red hair and wearing a simple dress looked at a man. She then pointed at the men and said, "It's your fault." A little boy appeared and then pointed at the men, "It's your fault." More and more people appeared out of thin air and started blaming the men for their deaths. For not doing anything about it. Bell. 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 He was shaken awake and jumped up with his eyes wide open. He looked around and was breathing heavily. He looked at a black catman who was showing concern for him. "Nightmares?" he asked. He nodded. "I did meditate, but it seems to still be raw." The catman patted the white-haired man's shoulder. "Yeah. I'm sorry you lost your family." Bell looked over to find his prosthetic hand and proceeded to put it on. "Ready?" "Yeah. Let's go." They then left their small hut and walked towards an abandoned temple. Not far off was a blonde-haired man looking at them with a serious look. Both knew the god in question wasn't the same as he once was. I recall how mischievously he used to smile. The death of his familia must have nearly broken him. "Lord Hermes." He nodded and looked away. The gods and goddesses descended to the lower world to be entertained. That was a long time ago, but now it is a fight for survival. They found a way to make them cease to exist. Alan. How did we end up from being blessed to being on the run? He chuckled dryly, because of some arrogant bastard who believes he is above the gods. Although the gods may be annoying, they don't all deserve this fate. He looked hurt from this. "I just wished we could have done more." He shook his head. "Either way, today is the day." He nodded as the catman led the way to the temple. Bottom of the temple. "Will this really work, Alan?" Bell asked. He nodded. "This is what Lord Janus told me would happen. If his calculations are correct, you will be sent back to the past so you can end this nightmare." Bell sighed, looking at the contraption in front of him. There is a large gate with runes inscribed around it. The language used is unknown except to the gods. A door opened not far off and in came a tall thin man, wearing goggles, with very wild brown hair, in a suit with 2 pocket watches on him. He looked very serious. "Lord Janus, is everything ready?" He nodded. "Now, Bell. I am going to send your soul back in time. Just to warn you, you can land in any part of the timeline. It could be the day you were born, or when you reached level 4 after the Xenos fiasco. I can't guarantee where you will end up, so be prepared for anything." "Right." He then turned around and looked at the gate. "I will do everything in my power to make sure that they don't rise and bring forth better changes to this world." Alan smirked. "I know you got this. Just make sure you save our asses. Otherwise, I will find a way to kick your ass if you fail." The white-haired man chuckled. "I won't fail." The god of time cracked his knuckles. "Once I do this, I will be sent back to the heavens. I don't know if I will be allowed to return after that, considering that playing with the timeline or making alternative universes could cause everything to collapse save for the heavens. It's a sacrifice for the greater good." Bell simply said. "It is." He then went over to the machine and pulled the lever. The machine began to turn on and a whirring sound was heard. "Good luck, Bell, and may the spirits guide you," Lord Janus said. Bell nodded. He then hugged Alan and patted his back. "Do what you can to get into my thick skull so I can be your friend again," Alan said. "I will, but more as a brother." He nodded. Then they parted as Bell went to the entrance of the gate. Janus was on the opposite side of the gate and closed his eyes. He had lived as long as he could, enjoying the lower world, but he knew that his time had come. He raised his arms and his arcanum lit up. He felt his powers being pushed into the gate while his life force drained out of him, since he's violating the oath that was sworn onto him. An oath that was different from the other gods and goddesses alike. The gate was opening and shining a brilliant light. It began to slowly mold the light into a rectangle, as if it was opening up the door. Then an explosion rang out as Alan readied his spear. Shit. He looked back. Come on, hurry up. The gate was opening as Bell got ready to jump in. I hope Hermes is able to hold on, Alan murmured. He looked at the door, ready for anything. Alan then felt his strength leaving him. Hermes had been sent back to the heavens. Come on, you son of a bitch. Even if my falna is gone, I am more than enough to take you all out. Then the gate finally opened. Belle saw nothing but a beautiful bright light and felt warmth from it. The doors finally blew open and multiple soldiers swarmed into the room. Alan moved towards the group. He impaled the first man with a quick thrust of his spear, then pulled the weapon out and swung it to engage the next man that moved forward. Go now, Belle. Belle nodded and jumped in. The contraption began to make various wheezing noises and began to shake. Janus fell to his knees, his arcanum and life force drained. A brilliant column of light appeared, and he returned to the heavens. If his theory is right, either we all disappear, or I will die here. Either way, I will embrace it. Alan thinks as he continues to work his way through the attacking soldiers, until he eventually felt a sword impale him. Normally Alan would have possessed the strength to keep fighting, but he fell to his knees feeling weak because of the lack of a falna. He was ready to finally die. He had fought for years without rest, he had prayed that he would be freed from it, and this was his answer. He watched as a sword slowly came down on him, ready to finish him off. However, at that moment all of the soldiers vanished. He then looked up as the world around him began to disappear. Alan smiled. He did dash. And those were his last words in that world as everything went white. Belle felt his body leaving him, yet he was floating. He saw the timeline of his world. The moment he was born, the moment his grandfather told him the tale of the Argonaut. Each memory was playing for him. When he reached the memory of his 14-year-old self, it stopped. He then felt something familiar reaching out to him. A feeling that reaches into the depths of his soul. He found it, and it was his younger self's soul. It was timid at first due to the intrusion of something towards him, but then embraced the familiarity of the soul, and a white light flashed around him, merging them into one. Orario, inside of an inn. Belle opened his eyes then blinked. He looked down at his hands and noticed his right hand was there. He got it back. He wondered how far he went back and then got up. He felt somewhat weak in his body. He raised his arm and aimed at a simple object. He then whispered, "Firebolt." Nothing. He checked his small money bag and counted how much money he had left, and he realized how far back he went. With a huge smile on his face, he began to plan out his first meeting with Hestia. He was excited to see her again and was also a bit nervous. He knew that after she accepted him, he would have to play it as normal, until he could tell her about him. For now though, he would have to play everything out as before. He grabbed his stuff, thanked the host, and he was gone. He had to make sure he was in the right location at the right time. A few hours later, he was thrown out of another familia. Come back when you are stronger. Belle nodded as he slowly walked away, doing his best to act sad since he felt Hestia was close by, observing, and had to be sad. Hello, young man. He turned around and saw a girl adorned with long black hair and pigtails, a white dress and wearing sandals. On the outside, he was awed, on the inside, he was overjoyed. Are you looking for a familia? She approached him with a gentle smile, stopping right in front of him. Would you like to join mine? As she extended her hand with an innocent smile. Yes. Yes, I would. He said as he took her outstretched hand. A few tears escaped his eyes as she bent down and hugged him. She assumed he was happy to finally join a familia, as she had seen how many of them had rejected him. She was running out of options and had made it to the end of the rope before she thought she finally found the perfect person. For Belle though, he was crying from the joy of being able to hold Hestia close again. His goddess. After the hug, she patted his head. My name is Hestia. Belle. Belle Cranel. She wiped away his tears as both stood up. Come. Let's go to my home. He nodded eagerly and both walked out of the alley. Abandoned church. Welcome to my home. She extends her arms. Belle smiled at the memories of this place. How many times they were together alone, before it was destroyed by the Apollo familia. Hestia looked somewhat nervous and noticed he was smiling. I know it isn't much, Anne. It's beautiful. He simply said. Her cheeks flushed and she led him inside. He knew with cleaning up the church, it can be a great place for his familia to live. Once heading to the basement, he saw a couch and a bed. To begin the process, I need you to take off your shirt, she said as she reached for a book on a small table, along with a needle. He nodded and took his shirt off and placed it aside. She turned back and saw his chest. She saw that he had a lithe body, but still had a nice body. Her heart was going a little fast. What was wrong with her? She couldn't help but be attracted to him, but a mortal. Then again, he did look cute and had an innocent face. Maybe that is the attraction. She shook her head and focused. Okay, lay on your stomach on the bed, she said as she reached for a book. He nodded and laid on his stomach. She got on top of him and he smiled softly. Now, let's start. She looked at the book again and pricked her finger with a needle. Then placed one drop of her divinity blood and was on his back. She began to focus on his back. Bel felt a warmth on his back and he began to remember the number of times his goddess was on his back. Especially when it was an intimate moment. She moved her hands a bit more and she was surprised by what she saw. Her cheeks became red and debated whether she should tell him about what she just read. She knew that in order for things to work out, trust has to exist between a god and their child. She prayed that he never reveals this ability to anyone. She finally finished and presented the paper to Bel. He looked at the information. Name, Bel Cranel. Familia, Hestia. STR, I0. End, I0. Dex, I0. Agi, I0. Mag, I0. Skill. Liaris freeze, fast growth as long as feelings last. The strength of the effects corresponds with the level of the user's feelings. As a side effect, it makes the user immune to charms. Interesting. I got it earlier than I thought. Must be my desire to get strong to protect those that I care about. It's the only explanation, he thought. He looked and noticed Hestia's face was red and looked shy. Bel understood why her behavior was that. Bel, I know we met and all, Anne. She looked down. She is having a hard time focusing. Ever since she got into the lower world months back, she felt an array of emotions she rarely felt before. She would have had an easy time blocking emotions like love, lust, and various others in her mind and heart. Now, she is feeling her heartbeat going fast, her cheeks flushed and parts of her body. She began to desire him. Seeing his bare top, made her want to continue touching him to doing more than that. Then she felt her hand being held. I know, she noticed his gentle smile, making her a little giggle a lit. Look, can you make me an extra copy without the skill being seen? I am going to the guild to register right now and then I need your help with something important. Can you do that for me, Hestia? She nodded and she went to his back. She read the part of the book on just showing the stats only. Once that was done, she couldn't help but touch his smooth back. He smiled and knew why she was already like this in the past with her being flustered on her emotions. She got better at controlling it as time went on, but he had to stop for now before it gets a little awkward. He places his shirt on, much to the disappointment of the goddess, and stands up. See you in a while, Bel said. She nodded. I will clean up around here. Just before he left, he gave her a kiss on the cheek and left. Hestia was stunned and touched her cheek. She liked it a lot. Bel. Pantheon. Misha was writing up some paperwork. So far her day was somewhat of a slow day and sighed to herself. She tried her best to look busy, but it's difficult to do so. She looked at the clock. Damn clock. Then she saw a white-haired teen approaching her booth. He looks pretty cute, she thought, and she smiled. Welcome to the guild. How may I help you today? He smiled back. Hi, my name is Bel Cranel and I would like to register myself as an adventurer. This surprised her. He doesn't look much of an adventurer, with his boyish look and skinny body. However, she had to do her job correctly. I see. Just to let you know, we have advisors to help out those that are starting their journey. Are you interested in having one? Bel nodded. Yes, please. The pink-haired guild member then asked, any preference of someone to advise you? He knew what to ask. Could it be with someone that is an elf? She thought for a moment and replied, "One moment and let me see if I can have someone assist you." She left for a moment. He heard a bit of shouting, and it sounded like a woman saying, "I am not interested, give it to Ina." He smiled to himself. Ina Tool, one of his wives. Loyal, kind, smart, and beautiful. He couldn't forget how much she helped him through his moments of tough times in his life. He tried to squash the image of her body already torn apart, as he remembered during the dark moment of his life. In came a half-elf with brunette hair and green eyes. She smiled respectfully and bowed. "Hello, my name is Ina Tool. Follow me." He nodded and followed her. Inside of the office was a desk and some books on a shelf. She sat down across from him and looked at him. "So, you want to be an adventurer?" He nodded. "What is the dungeon? What is there to expect inside of the dungeon? And what is your purpose being in there?" She asked. "This is actually a test to see what kind of person he is. A dungeon is more than just monsters you face. It is also a test where the dungeon tests your surroundings, your fears, and your conviction. My purpose in being in the dungeon is to understand the why its existence, and also to face my own fears." He looked at her with a conviction. She was surprised to hear this. She looked into his eyes and looked as if he had seen horrors in the past. "Are you sure you are ready?" He nodded. She went over and took out various documents and forms. "Okay. Let's fill out your documentation and then from there we will see how things go for you." Once he was done, the orientation began. 1 hour later. Bell smiled as he got all that information in. It felt like last time, but it seems that she is far more helpful this time around. He paid the fee for the registration and everything looked set. "Before we end this, do you need to borrow a weapon and armor?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, I already have a weapon waiting for me back at home and armor." He did lie, but he will obtain 2 knives once he is done with his task. "Any other questions?" she asked. "So I have to come back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for a test to see how I am, and also how much access I am given by each floor." He tried to make sure everything was clarified. "Yes, that's correct." "Then, I am good for now." He got up and shook her hand. "I do hope you study what you can today," Ina pointed out. "I will." "Thank you, Miss Tool, I will see you tomorrow." Just as he was leaving, he never saw the other person bumping into him. The other person neither did, due to how much paperwork she was carrying was blocking her view. Paper scattered all over the ground and Belle began to help out the person. "Sorry about that, I didn't see you." He was picking up the paper. "That was my fault," a girl's voice answered. He saw who he was helping out. The red-haired werewolf looked at the young man. "He looks cute. Like a rabbit. A new worker." She looked a bit curiously and continued to pick up the paperwork. After picking up the last paperwork, he helped her place it on the table. "Thank you." "You're welcome. Bye." What's your name?" she shouted. "Belle. Belle Cranel." He then left. She sighed and went to see Ina looking amused. "I assume he is a new hirer." Ina shook her head. "A new adventurer." She blinked for a moment. "But," she sighed, "he doesn't look like one. I would have found some way he could work behind the desk." The half-elf didn't say anything and hoped that maybe on the first day, he would change his mind. Abandoned church. Hestia was finishing up cleaning up the last seats and sighed happily. She felt like some sort of housewife, waiting for her husband to come home. That was a strange feeling, she thought. She blushed and knew she had to find work to support him and help him out. She can't rely on him on everything. Plus she had to also find a way to pay off her debts to her best friend Hephaestus. The last thing she will need is to cause any more trouble between them. The door opened and Belle smiled. "I'm home." "So, how did it go?" Hestia asked as she placed the dirty rag on a bag. "It went well. I will start tomorrow morning." "Oh, do we have shovels around here?" he asked. She looked at him oddly and replied, "Yes we do, why?" grabbed them, along with a wheelbarrow and something to cover it. Trust me. She nodded and went to retrieve the items in question. Once they were outside, Hestia locked the door and both left. As they were outside of Orario, Hestia noticed Bell had an excited look on his face, while pushing the wheelbarrow. "Bell, are you sure you know where you're going?" she asked while walking beside him. She noticed Bell stopping at a certain tree and was looking for something. Then he smirked, finding what he was looking for. "Don't worry, Hestia, everything will be answered soon." Okay, 10 paces facing south of the city. He began to walk from the tree 10 paces and stopped. "Turn right and keep walking 30 paces. He walked on more. Bell remembered a map he saw during a break-in and learned how this organization was able to obtain the income on their operations. Treasures that were discovered by them. But now he will use it for a better purpose. He then stopped at the 30th pace. Then I turned left and walked 5 paces and stopped. "Shovel, please." She nodded and she grabbed the shovel on the wheelbarrow. He began to dig on that area. She watched him dig as she pondered what he was doing. Was it a treasure? He kept digging and she wondered what his secret was. What could it be? Then after 4 feet, he hit something. There we go. He dug around it and there was a chest. He smirked and pulled it out. It was heavy in a way and I tried to carry it. He was able to place it on the side and was relieved. He placed it on the wheelbarrow and smiled. A few, found it. She giggled and he covered it with a large sheet of sort. He then tied it. Okay, let's head to another entrance I spotted when I came in. The last thing we need. He lifted the handle of the wheelbarrow. "One, is someone seeing this?" She nodded and they were gone from the place. Once they returned to the abandoned church, Bell placed the chest down in the bedroom. "So, what's in it?" Hestia asked. He smiled as he broke the locks with a hammer. He opened it and Bell smiled. Hestia's eyes widened. A stack of large amounts of gold coin on one end, some documents of sort and jewelry in there that looks like it is worth a fortune. How much is in there?" Bell looked at it. "From what I remember, it is estimated to be around, 900 million. She gasped at the amount of the value of the contents in question. This could deal with her debts, remodel the church, and maybe help her friends out. "Bell, how did you know about the location of the chest?" He knew that this would be a tough moment of explaining this, but he had to tell her the truth about everything. He held her hands and looked into her eyes. "Hestia, here is the whole story and I do hope you are ready." He sighed and looked into her eyes. "I'm not from this time. I'm from the future." She looked into his eyes and found out he wasn't lying at all. To be continued.